Welcome back to the county seat. Our topic today is animal control. We've covered actually mosquito abatement as a sidebar, which goes one direction with animals. Now we're going to talk about trying to save them. And we have with us on this roundtable discussion Mike Morgan, who's the director of the South Utah Valley Animal Shelter, Sergeant Eldon Packer from Utah County Sheriff's Department, not wanting to actually be called the dog catcher, and Carl Larkey, who's the director of communications for the Humane Society of Utah. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Let's talk about animal control, okay? Before we got into this conversation today, as we were warming up for the show, the topic came up that it's really not animal control, it's people control. What is the biggest problem that you have with animals?
Really, that's a great way to put it. Animals in and of themselves are great creatures, but they need us for direction and for guidance and for control. What we ask people to do is to be responsible with their animals, to keep them contained, to vaccinate them, to license them, to identify them, and to take care of them, and to understand that the commitment is for the life of the animal. It's not something that's just disposable. And I think if people will do that, that makes our jobs a lot easier.
Yeah.
What tools do you have in your bucket to help if you've got an animal that you pick? Because primarily that's what you do. You get a call, say there's a dog running through the neighborhood, or there's a cat stuck in the tree.
Any animals large or anything, that's what we respond on. So.
And so when you go out on a call, what do you want to see as far as that pet is concerned to bring out a happy ending?
Well, obviously we want that pet to be treated, you know, well, and so we try and train our people well to be able to deal with those animals safely. Now, sometimes, I mean, we do have all the tools. We have to have a catch pole or other things with that, and so our people are trained in that. But you know, it really does come down to the owner. That one of the biggest problems is people letting their animals loose or not caring for them, not paying attention to what they're doing, and you know, the animal will get bored. It will decide to take off, look at other horizons too. You know, it eventually will come home, but so it's one of those things where our guys go out and find the animal, put it in the truck. If we can find an owner, that's the preferable thing to do, is try and take it home first. If we can't do that, then we have to take it to a shelter like Mike's shelter in the South County area there.
Now, I suppose that's part of the licensing issue, is that helps you identify?
It is. Licensing is extremely important. If we can have a license on an animal, it makes it that much easier. You know, we can just look up the number. A lot of times we can call the shelter, other things if necessary. We have chip readers, other things if the animal has been chipped. So our guys can do that right there at the location and get it right back to the owner. That's much more preferable and a lot less expensive for the owner as well. In that, you know, they may end up with a citation. We don't like to issue citations, but it's kind of a necessary evil in that if we have individuals that don't respect the freedom of others as well, then that's one of the things that we have to do to be able to control it. And
how much does this whole chip technology cost, Carl?
$25 of the Humane Society of Utah, generally speaking. And we've had animals, I don't know, Mike, if you've had the same case, but we've had animals that have been lost for 7 years who've been turned in to us, and 7 years later, we're returning that animal back to the original owner. So they work. And I think it's well worth the $25 or whatever the fee is. But it goes back to the responsibility. I agree with Mike and Sergeant Packer. We don't have a pet problem, we have a people problem. And if people will take care of this issue and address it, be accountable and responsible, then we all have a lot less on our hands.
Well, you're going to say something.
I was going to say, with the microchip, we've also found not only animals that have been lost, but animals that have been stolen from people, and we've identified them and gotten them back to the proper owners. So it really is a valuable tool.
So you have to keep a jail cell down there at the shelter for the people that stole the animal as well as...
We let Sergeant Packer handle that at the sheriff's office.
Call him.
Now, part of the licensing also, because I'm going to play the consumer advocate here. I'm going to play the taxpayer advocate. Why should I have to pay all that money for a license? And then on top of that, a chip?
Well, great answer to that is just like you said, why do we license our cars? You know, there's a revenue component to that. We have to run an animal shelter. We have that, and we have to be able to fund it. And there's a revenue component there, and I'm not gonna lie about that, and I'm not gonna hide from it. That is something that helps us, because we're trying to make the owners of the animals responsible for animal care and control, and not just all the taxpayers. Unfortunately, it doesn't cover all of it. So the taxpayers end up footing the bill for the rest of it. But we try to make the owners responsible as much as we can for the cost of that.
I was very surprised. I'd like the viewers to know how much it costs to care for an animal on a per day basis.
At our shelter, it's $54, and that's just a raw figure. We take all of our expenses and we divide it out by the number of animals that we've got, and it's $54. It kind of depends on how you figure that, but it's expensive.
That's your overhead. That's your medical care.
Yeah.
That's all the things that go into taking care of these animals that people don't think about, and the adoption fees don't come close to covering those costs.
True. That's very true.
Now, from your standpoint with the shelter, you actually can rely more on a lot of volunteer help on that cost. But how does a nonprofit? They don't have a tax base to go to.
The generosity and the kindness of strangers. We rely on donations, and thankfully people are generous. Even in this day and age, when we're in this recession, people still love animals, and they still will donate funds and money that allows us to do what we do. Without them, we would not be able to operate.
Okay, in my mind, the dog catcher, excuse me, Sergeant, for making that
I'll
statement.
take the term.
Coming back to that,
That's right.
You know, he's the most reviled member of the community, with a net skulking around behind trees just waiting for Fido to come by.
There has been many cartoons on that, yes.
Okay. Tell me what your aim is in enforcement. Tell me what the procedure is. You don't just like start with a net and a bait stake or anything like that.
No. First of all, they're out on patrol. You know, they'll go out and travel the areas, different neighborhoods or other things that they're having problems with. In that, typically they'll run on a dog that's been at large, or a cat or whatever. We do get calls. We get other things. They will go out and, first of all, most of the time they will, you know, whistle, talk to the dog, that kind of thing. It's amazing what they can learn and what they will do. They definitely are very deft at dealing with animals, and they can entice animals well to be able to come in, and they can deal with them very well. So,
is it true that a lot of animals just don't like uniforms?
It is very true. It is very true. I had an officer one day that he actually he called an animal. It happened to be a Rottweiler. The dog jumped in the truck with him and then proceeded to decide that he needed to have a treat. So the officer had a struggle on his hands at that point. So, you know, there are things that
you mean you guys don't come equipped with dog bones?
No, they don't.
You know, along that line, I think the thing that's important to remember is animal control really has to do with public health and public safety. And controlling those animals that are running at large minimizes the risk to the public of bites, of accidents, those kinds of things. And so that's one of the things that I think people forget. It's not just the bad guys with the nets.
Very quickly, how important is the spay and neuter? Particularly, you say cats. That
critical. It's absolutely critical. If we're going to solve the pet overpopulation problem, not just in Utah, but in the United States, we've got to have people spaying and neutering their animals, yes, and then adopting from shelters. That's how we're going to get out of this problem.
That's exactly right. There's not another way out. We've got to control the amount of unwanted pets in the state and in the nation.
Well, stay with us. We'll be back with more of the county seat. While we're on the topic of feral control, we'll talk about feral animals and some of the populations. What ties the hands of people involved in animal control as far as the restrictions and things that come out of their toolbox in a little bit more detail. And we'll find out some unusual stories about some of the bizarre animals that animal control encounters. We'll be right back with more of the county seat in just a minute.
The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration. SITLA manages 3.5 million acres of Utah lands with the express purpose of furthering the education of Utah students while promoting local industry, oil and gas, even residential development, all at the same time. Through the careful use of trust lands, we distributed more than $22 million to Utah schools last year. The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, building the state's permanent school fund.
If you ever dreamt of running through an old west town, searching for outlaws, hiding behind the stable, or inside the old church, with your 6-shooter by your side, well, your dreams have come true. Castlegate Town Shooting Range is the most detailed, most realistic, and outright most fun shooting range you've ever seen. The North Springs Shooting Range.
Cedar City, Utah is home of the Tony Award-winning Utah Shakespeare Festival. But did you know that we also offer a different kind of play?
Discover the of scenic southern Utah.
Almost 45% of the oil produced in Utah, 7.8 million barrels, comes from Duchesne County. That oil feeds our state economy, provides job growth, and supports local business. Here in Duchesne County, we're working to make Utah an economic, cultural, and technological leader. Whether you're here for business or pleasure, Duchesne County will welcome you with open arms and invite you to explore all the beauty of the Uinta Mountains. Duchesne County, close enough for business, far enough to get away.